the AIIC. For my sins, I'm a chartered management accountant. As a very junior accountant, one of my first management accounting jobs had the responsibility for credit control. And that was a learning experience, I can tell you. And then I developed, managed, and implemented credit control for all sorts of different companies through my career. Um, as I said, I'm now the chair of the AIIC, but I also run my own inventory company. And please do feel free to link in with me. I'm on there. I do go on there occasionally. So, if you message me, you might even get a response. Who knows? Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping. Slides will be distributed after the meeting. We are recording, and I will send a recording link after the webinar is closed. There's a little bit of time while Microsoft processes the video and stuff, but you will get a link for that. I've put a zip folder in chat. Hopefully you can all see that. If not, I'll put it in again later. But the zip folder has got all of the resources I'm going to speak about tonight. So there's a load of stuff in there which might be useful for you. I have blocked out some time tonight for questions. Should take about 45 minutes for the main presentation. So feel free to ask at the end. You can add them into the chat, but such is the way with Teams, I can't actually see the chat at the moment. All I can see is my screen. And after the event, if you think of something which you wish you'd ask, then just feel free, email me, and I'll be happy to answer those as well. Okay, so what's the point of tonight then? So really what I want to do is to give you a practical understanding of credit control. This isn't accountancy. I'm not going to be doing a load of that stuff. That's all very boring. And, you could be doing much more interesting things than that. But we're going to be going through a few bits and pieces which all come from really my practical experience of running credit control for different sizes of company. So we're going to look at what credit control actually is, my theory of the three types of debtors, how you chase them, and I'm going to run through the different types of documentation you might want. And as I say, this has got a practical focus rather than being an accounting seminar. So what is credit control? Well, you can boil this down to one question. And the question is, would you prefer your money to be in a bank account, in your bank account, or in your client's bank account? And the little phrase that I've put there, I have specifically italicized those words because they're the really important words. Credit control is all about getting your money that people owe you into your bank account in a timely manner. If you're a bit cash poor and you've got a load of people that owe you money, credit control is the best way to solve your credit control, your cash flow issues. So let's start off then with the credit control policy. This is going to be a little bit backwards. It will make sense later on in the presentation, so do stick with me. But the credit control policy is an internal document as such. And the idea is that you are expressing in this document what your credit control policy is. In other words, how you're going to run your accounts receivable function. Now, accounts receivable is one of these accounting terms we use so that normal people can't understand what we're doing. Essentially, accounts receivable are the people that receive the invoices that you send, and theoretically, they make the payments to you. So these are the guys we're chasing. Now, normally, a credit control policy, you'll write one of these for a medium or large sized company. But actually, I think it's a really helpful document to go through the process of writing it, because even if you're a sole trader, it makes you think about the major themes involved in credit control. Now, what will I include in my credit control policy? Well, it's a description of what you're going to do. So in other words, I'm going to send a reminder email. It tells you when you're going to do it. Well, I'm going to send my reminder email 3 days after the invoice is due. And what will you do when things go wrong? Well, if they don't pay after they get the reminder email, then I'm going to send a letter reminder, or whatever it might be. Now, you need to write this after you've been through this presentation. It'll make sense later, I promise you, but actually your credit control policy is the most important thing, because essentially it's you thinking about how you're going to run your business and who you're going to give credit to, or indeed if you're going to give credit at all. You may decide you're not going to do that. Now, whenever I'm thinking about credit control, I always say that process is the absolute key here. So you must have a credit control process. And this really comes from your credit control policy, I guess. Now, within your process, you've got to have a set of terms and conditions. I'll go through this a little bit more later, but basically the terms and conditions is the external document, the external representation of your credit control policy, which you send to people who you do business with. You need to have documentation in your policy. So you maybe you'll have a first reminder email, you'll have a second reminder email, you'll have a final demand letter, those sorts of things. And you'll need to know your timings. So you need to know when you're going to do all of these things. And I would argue that actually your credit control process is exactly the same as doing an inventory. So when we do an inventory, really, we don't want our landlords to have to use them. What we want is that everything's sweetness and light, the tenants are wonderful, they don't break anything, and everyone goes away happy. But we do an inventory because we know that's not true. We know that every so often there's a tenant who does indeed unscrew all the doors from the walls and takes away all the sockets and things like that, or leaves a fridge in the garden. So it's kind of a backstop. And what I'd say is I always think that if you've got a credit control policy in place and you've got your process in place, bad debt is much less likely to happen. So I am now going to show you a confusing process flowchart. So don't worry, this is not as complex as it looks. There's a lot of bits and pieces in there, but actually it's a followable process for what happens through the life of a contract, or the life of a sale, I suppose you'd say. So we've got 4 different swim lanes there to the left hand side, and these are split down into what you do at what point during your relationship with the client. Now, in the credit control process, before you even take work, you've got to set up the customer. You might decide you're going to do a credit check. You may consult your policy and say, no, this customer needs to be on pro forma invoicing. In other words, prepayment. You will send them a set of terms and conditions before you do any work, and you may consider a contract. So you might think of a contract. I personally don't have any in place with my regular letting agents, but if somebody comes to you and says, I want you to do £50,000 worth of student work, well, happy days, but you would probably want to put a contract in place for that one, because you're going to be spending out money and you want to make sure you get paid. The second swim lane there on taking work, when you take work, what you want to do is make sure that you raise an invoice promptly. Now, this might change depending on your letting agent. I've got different people for, different timings for different people. So my private landlords pay before I do any work. Brand new letting agents pay before I do any work. I've got other letting agents who we just store up all the invoices and then essentially send them one invoice at the end of the month. So it depends how you want to do that. The last one there, pre-due date courtesy reminder. I'll talk a little bit about that later on, but these are becoming a lot more prevalent now. People are sending out courtesy reminders before your invoice is even due. And you see the yellow flowchart there. The day the invoice comes past due, you will send perhaps a friendly reminder between 1 and 7 days overdue. You might phone them. You might try and get a payment commitment from them. And then if it goes into red, so it's getting 14 to 30 days overdue or even longer, then again, you might be sending letters, you might be setting up a payment plan or sending a final demand. You may get to the point where you have to do a legal review, send a letter before action, and you may even have to take them to court. Now, in an ideal world, that never happens, but you need to have that in your policy to make sure that if you do get there, you know what you're going to do. And then I've added a fifth swim lane to the side there, which says on payment. So I always say that when you receive a payment from a customer, you need to think about what's happened. Now, in most cases, people will just pay you and you don't need to worry about anything as far as that's concerned. You can just carry on with that relationship. But if people have been a bit tardy about paying, then you might want to think about them and say, is this just, just an accident? Is it just an odd thing that's happened? Are they always going to owe me money? Is there a point where I'm going to have to take action? Do I want to keep this client at all? So you may have to consider some of these things before you take work again. So I said I would run through my 3 types of debtor. Now, in my experience, people fall into these baskets. If they owe you money, they are either a corporate debtor, so they're one of the big companies, one of the big letting agents, estate agencies, those sorts of people. They're a private debtor, so they might be an accidental landlord. They might have 2 or 3 properties. They might be an individual letting agent with just one office and just a few properties on their portfolio. Could be anything like that. And then the worst one is the professional avoider. Don't worry, I'm going to go through this a lot later. But these are the people who make it their habit not to pay you. That's what they do all the time. In fact, they make it part of their business model. So they will avoid paying you as much as they possibly can for as long as they possibly can. So I think these 3 people need to be dealt with in different ways. And the start point for that is to understand what they are and why they don't pay. So the corporate debtor, why don't they pay? Typically, your invoices have got lost. Your chases get lost. They might be cash poor. It's less likely, but it might happen. If they are, they might be doing a thing called leading and lagging. So what this means is that they chase their debts that are owed to them very heavily, and they avoid paying debts that they owe as long as they can. And that just improves their cash flow position. Much more likely, especially if it's a new account, they're just slow setting up new accounts. They're just inefficient, bureaucratic, and you have to jump through hoops. Or somebody's left. Julie in accounts payable has left, and the new person is either slow getting up to speed, or like one place that I came across last month when I did my credit control, they just didn't replace her. They thought they could do without her. They've replaced her now, though. Poor old Julie. Generally, in terms of corporate debtors, what I find is once you've been set up on the system and you've got it working, generally it runs on fine. It's not a problem. They don't pay 1 month and suddenly stop paying the next. That's unusual. But you do have to put in some work and you do have to jump through a few hoops. So how would I chase my corporate debt up? Well, my very first one, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is make friends with accounts payable. Everybody thinks that credit control is a really angry and confrontational system. It's not. You have to remember that the accounts payable team at a big company or a medium-sized company for that matter, they're just doing their jobs, and they're doing their jobs in accordance with their policy. And if you haven't sent them a copy of your, I don't know, your employer's liability certificate, you don't get paid. If you haven't sent them your bank details, you don't get paid. They're not going to chase you. When you phone them, they'll go, oh yeah, you haven't sent us your insurance certificates. And then you have to jump through that particular hoops. So you don't get angry with them. Essentially, the best bet is to find somebody who works in accounts payable and be their best buddy. Find out what football team they support. find out what things they like to do when they're not paying accounts. So I don't know, are they a gardener? Are they a cook? That sort of thing. Because I can tell you, having been not only working in accounts payable, but also being a financial controller or a financial director, when it comes time to do a payments run, the accounts payable people will produce a list of all the people that they want to pay, and they'll take that to their manager, and their manager will go, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. If you're not friends with accounts payable, you probably won't even be on that list. So if you know Julie in accounts payable and you know that she likes to grow, I don't know, tomatoes in a greenhouse, you'll get on that list because she'll remember you. You've got to remember your invoices and chases get lost. I've been doing my credit control over the last couple of days, and I've had exactly this. And what we've done is we've set up a process with a very large agent. And then for some reason, all of a sudden, my invoices have started going into spam for no apparent reason. And it's never done that before. Now, what I would say is when you set up the account, especially with a big bureaucratic company, have a word with people and find out what their process is. So find out which email address you have to send it to. Find out who has to sign it off. Find out who you need to chase. Find out who Julie is. Send reminders and statements. Automate it if you can from your accounting package. They shouldn't do this, but I've known companies that only pay on reminder or only pay on statements. My opinion is it's very naughty, but once I found out what they were, I found out that I ended up sending a statement the day after the invoice was due, and oddly enough, I got paid, which is, stupid really. But it's, these are hoops you have to jump through with a big bureaucratic company. Now, at the end of the day, if you're not getting paid, you're jumping through the hoops and it's still not working. The nuclear option is to find out the name of a director of the company, find out who the financial controller is, find out who the financial director is. Because I can promise you, when I was acting as a financial director or a controller of a company and somebody phoned me and said, I wonder if you can help me, my invoices aren't being paid and I can't work out why, I guarantee you they would have been on the next payment run, because the last thing you've got time for as a financial director is dealing with debtors, with creditors. So if you have to, find them out. And again, don't go in all guns blazing, be friendly, but the financial controller or director will know what you're talking about. So the private debtor, why doesn't the private debtor pay? They probably missed your invoice. A lot of private debtors are getting on a bit in years and they're not technically able. Sometimes I've had times in the past where I've had to physically print out an invoice and send it to them, and they weren't messing, they were just elderly. They might have forgot. I forget things all the time. They might not have the money. It's expensive letting out a property. There are lots of things you have to pay for, and they shouldn't contract for things that they haven't got the money for, but some people do. They might not know how to pay. You have to make sure on your invoices you've got plenty of different payments methods. In general, the average private landlord and the average small company doesn't want to owe money. The most likely option is they just haven't seen your invoice or they've forgotten. So just check with them. Have your invoices gone to spam? This is one of the annoyances. I use QuickBooks. One of the annoyances with QuickBooks is sometimes it starts sending invoices to spam for no apparent reason whatsoever. Make sure you send reminders. You may want to do a friendly call. People respond to different things. Some people respond to emails. Some people respond to calls. You'll get to know who responds to which. If they've run out of money, I always say you are better to accept stage payments than you are to get all upset and angry and say, no, I want you to pay me in full. You are better off saying, okay, if it's £100 debt, I'll take £25 a month for the next 4 months, than you are thinking that you're going to get £100. Now, some people do gain this, most people don't. And if someone's been honest enough to say, look, I've run out of money, then I'm happy to be flexible on that. The other thing is have flexible payment methods. So we do direct debit, go cardless, PayPal, bank transfer. I don't like to do check payments, but some of our older landlords do like to send checks. Um, it's annoying, especially since the bank account that I set up for my business, I didn't realize at the time, doesn't accept checks. But for one or two people, I'm flexible and I say, right, I'll take the check and I pay it into my personal bank account and then transfer it over. So just think about being flexible in terms of what you offer to people. Okay, this is the best fun ever, the professional avoider. So these people really are great at finding ways to avoid pain. I say to you, don't get emotional about this. You're not the only person they're doing this to. This is their business model. Not only that, they've been doing it for years. So they've perfected their approach. They know what works and what doesn't. So how do you spot these guys? Well, they will quibble about everything. So they'll moan about the fact that you're using a template report instead of handwriting everything out in a quill pen. They will want multiple copies of an invoice that was never received. They'll raise ridiculous complaints. I had one the other day where one of my clerks had said that the salad drawer was cracked in a fridge, and the landlord complained that we hadn't written down that there were 7 cracks. What do you do? They might go quiet. They might think if they ghost you, you'll go away. This is where your process comes in. The other thing they might do is they might get aggressive, and some people do this. They're very rare, but what they've found is if they get angry and say, "How dare you chase this debt? Are you saying I'm not going to pay?" Da, 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 da. That's just a ruse. It's just a thing that they do to make people go away and make you feel like you're on the defensive. Don't worry. These are the hardest people to deal with, but the most fun. And you've got to dig in, just follow your process. So, how do I chase these people? Well, like I say, stick to your guns, follow your process, and always remember that they're really good. They're professionals at this. So, you need to be a professional credit controller. Firm but polite. I had a guy who we got the money off eventually, but he swore down the phone at my ops manager and he swore down the phone at me. He was a horrible person, but he paid in the end. I didn't swear back, which is unusual for me. Follow up quickly. Right. The thing that they like to do is to go quiet and hope you're going to go away. And the way that they know that's working is if you send them, for instance, a first email and say, please pay this within 7 days. If on the 8th day you don't send them a second email saying you haven't paid this, they'll assume that you've gone away. Also, think about the signals that you're giving. Think about the language you use when you're talking to people. So if they say, "Oh, I'm really sorry about that. Didn't see the invoice." If you give the impression that that's okay and say, "Oh, don't worry about that. That's fine. These things happen. Everything's okay." Then they'll take that as a sign that you're actually a bit of a walkover. If you say, okay, let's make sure that we're going to get all the invoices to you when they need to get to you. And by the way, will you pay this as soon as you get the invoice? You're being a little bit more professional about it. Now, don't get emotional at this point. Make sure you use logic. Make sure you use clear language. Be certain about your facts. And when you've got your money, think about the relationship. You might want to consider direct debits. I've got a couple of customers on direct debits. They work really well. I use Go Cardless. Other companies are available. Go Cardless work well for me. There's a fee to pay, obviously, but they're good. Okay, terms and conditions. Right. Your terms and conditions are essentially the legalistic way of you telling your customer what you're going to do and what you expect them to do. In other words, I'm going to do this job for you. I'm going to do a midterm or I'm going to do a checkout, and I expect you to pay 7 days after you get the invoice or whatever it is. Now, the thing here is that there aren't any standard terms and conditions. There are loads all over the place. And of course, you know what lawyers are like. They all like to rewrite everything, because the more they're rewriting, the more they're charging. But essentially, there are some things that, everything will need to have in some way. And when you do these, you might want to bring in some commercial thinking or some credit control thinking. This will make a little bit more sense later. Also, you can have different terms and conditions for different customers. And what I mean by that is I've got a set of terms and conditions for private landlords, and I've got a set for corporate companies. So a lot of my corporates, like I said earlier, I invoice them at the end of the month for all the jobs we've done in that month. But my private landlords, I invoice them in advance, and they have to pay in advance. And if they haven't paid, I don't attend the job. So what should you include? So again, I say there aren't any standards, but generally speaking, these are the things you want to include in there. This looks onerous, but it's really not. Some of these things are one line. So for instance, governing law, this agreement is governed by the law of England and Wales, or wherever you might be. And you can make these as big or as small as you want to do. There's a copy of sort of template terms and conditions in the resources pack. You can just get that, change the logo on it, change the information that's in there. It's all marked up what you need to change, and you can just make it suitable for your company. I'm not going to read through those, but I am going to give you a list of other things that you might want to add. Again, huge list, but not all of these will apply to your business. For instance, VAT treatment. If you're not VAT registered, you don't need to worry about that. Or you might want to put in and say, we are not VAT registered. Dead simple. Retention of title clause. So I've got one of these in there. Normally, this is for physical goods. So in other words, it'll say something like the goods remain our property until you've paid in full. Well, I will include something in there that says you're not entitled to use our reports until you've paid in full. Dead simple. So again, all of these things, you can change these to suit the way that you work and your customers. And remember, you don't have to have just one set of terms and conditions. You can change them depending on the company you're dealing with. So, oh, what I should have said about terms and conditions, you can't really enforce a debt if you haven't told people what you expect them to do. So I like to use the analogy of an HR meeting where somebody's been a bit naughty. They've used their mobile phone for personal calls. And you go into the HR meeting, you say, now you've been a bit naughty. You've used your mobile phone for making personal calls. And they go, where does it say I can't? And you suddenly realize at that point, you haven't got a mobile phone policy. So you can't discipline them because you've never said, don't use it for personal calls. And it's the same with terms and conditions. If you haven't said to the customer, I expect you to pay in 7 days, and if you don't, I'm going to charge you interest, you can't do that. So your terms and conditions, I suppose, are the bedrock of the agreement and the work you do for somebody. So I advance to that slide a little bit quickly. I am not that flexible, I promise you. Anyway, where do I tend to be flexible? Well, I've said that normally it's all about sticking to the process and making sure you follow that through, but sometimes I do sort of, blur the edges a bit. So I've got a corporate that pay every fortnight on a Tuesday. So if they've got an invoice which is overdue on the Monday, I'm not going to chase them because I know it's probably going to turn up on the Tuesday. If they don't pay on the Tuesday, then I'll chase them on the Wednesday. That's fine. But it's about knowing your customer a little bit more. If businesses have got a cash flow issue, so I had one particularly good customer of ours. She does a lot of work for us. She's a lovely lady, and she owed me a lot of money at one point. And I said, look, you really need to clear it. And she said, I've literally just paid my corporation tax. I've just paid my VAT bill, and I've got no money in the bank account. So we came to an agreement. She paid me over a number of months. Everything's fine. She's still a customer now, and she was really happy that I was flexible. I didn't particularly like it, but you know, sometimes you've got to be a bit pragmatic about these things. And by the same token, private debtors that might need help. Sometimes, you know, we all make mistakes, don't we? It may well be you've got a little old lady who's got an old family house and she's letting it out, and you know, she just needs a bit of help with this. And large accounts where special terms have been agreed. Again, you know, £50,000 worth of student work knocks on your door. They say, look, we're not going to pay you in 7 days. We're going to pay you in 30 days, or we're going to pay you in 45 days. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll have to sign a contract, but yeah, that's great. Payments that come in just after the due date. So what I do is when I do in my credit control policy, my policy is to chase 3 days after due date, so that it gives time for them to sit there on the due date, make the payment, and eventually it will turn up in my bank account. And businesses that I know well and have just made a mistake. So there's one agent, again, they do a lot of work with us and they're really nice people and lovely and smashing, and they missed 2 payments. The first time they missed one, they'd printed out my invoice and it got stuck to the back of another invoice and they didn't pay it. And as the moment I phoned them, they were mortified and they paid straight away. And then a few months later, because it's a very, very small single office letting agent, the owner had gone off on holiday and hadn't made my payment before he went. It was partially our fault because we were a day late sending out an invoice. So, you know, you just got to have to sort of smile, and it's extra bants, isn't it, for when you go in the office. Okay, so the practicalities. So if you're thinking now, how do I go about doing all this though? So what do you do? Well, first of all, you don't need to make up a control process, a credit control process flowchart like this, but you'll be looking at your policy, and you'll be noting where the points are that you've got to take action. So the first thing I do is on my accounting system, I will run what's called an AR report. So an accounts receivable report, sometimes called an aging report, an aging summary. If you use computer-based accounting rather than writing in a book, some people do. Your system will have this report on there. It might just be called something else. Now, if you've never seen one of these before, so the left-hand side, I've got my list of completely and utterly not made up letting agents. And then I've got columns for the amount of money that they owe me. So I've got the total right on the far right-hand side, and then it's split down by how old the debt is. So if it's in current, it's not, they don't owe me that yet. We've raised the invoice, but it's not at the due date. So I'm ignoring that sort of at the moment. If they're in the 1 to 30 block, it means they're either 1 day overdue or up to 30 days overdue. So this is a bit annoying. So there'll be some there. No, there's a real estate agent there, Connells. Oh, and I put Countrywide in there as well. So, you know, I know that they are big corporates, and things can sort of take a bit of time to work their way through the system. I'm not too worried if a massive agent owes me £114 and 91p. I'm much more worried if it's a private landlord. Talk more about that in a minute. When they get to 31 to 60, I'm getting annoyed. 61 to 90, I'm sending a final demand / letter before action. And 91 and over, they are probably heading towards the court. So what I do is I will take this report, I export it into Excel, and then it looks something like this. So what I've got there is I've got all of my AR aging to the left, and to the right hand side, I'm putting in notes. Notes are really, really important in the credit control process. They're important for 2 reasons. The first reason is you need to remember what you said to somebody when you come back to it in a month's time. And very often what you'll find is the debtor will say to you, oh, well, you said to me I had another 30 days to pay. And because you can't remember, you can't argue that case. But if you've written it down in your comments, you know absolutely that you didn't say that. The second reason you need to make full and complete notes is if in the unfortunate result that it ends up in court, you'll need to evidence that you've sent them reminders, you've chased them, they've promised they'd pay, and so on and so forth. And you can see there, what I've done is I've split this down. So my comments are there to say when I've chased them. If I've sent them a personal email, I've got the date I sent them the personal email. If I'd had to phone them, the date I phoned them. And if I'm sending a letter before action, then it's in there in the far right-hand column. Now, you can do it any way you like, but just do make sure that you keep full and complete notes. So I spoke a little bit earlier about the pre-due date reminder. Now, this is a thing which is gaining in popularity. It's essentially you send out a reminder, but the debt isn't even due. Very often it'll go out about 3 days in advance of the invoice due date. You don't have to send one of these. It tends to be firm but friendly in approach. It includes factual details such as the amount and the invoice number, and it'll be very low key. And it is friendly. It's, hi, just to let you know, friendly reminder, this is due in 3 days time. Here's our bank details. Now, actually, research has shown it does improve collection. It does, to an extent, reduce bad debts. But I find it really annoying when I get one of these because I haven't said I'm not going to pay it, and I've still got 3 days to pay. So I don't use these in my company. But again, this is your credit control policy, so you can do what you like. What I would do is my policy is to send out a reminder on due date +3. Like I said earlier, I like to give people 3 days for the payments to hit my bank account eventually, even though the majority of payments now are faster payments and they turn up immediately. And if it hasn't turned out, I've got a reminder that goes out automatically from my system. And you are much, much better off with the first reminder to make sure that it's automated, because you don't even have to worry about it then. Firm but friendly. So again, we're not getting angry at this point, are we? We're not upset. It may just be a little bit of a hold up. Julie in accounts payable might be on holiday. Who knows? It could be anything, couldn't it? Again, including factual details. Again, it's low key, just like the pre-due date reminder. And you're not threatening other consequences at this point. You're wanting to retain the business relationship and you want to be friendly and stuff like that. So, don't get heavy. And this is often the way you pick things up. So, yesterday I sent out a load of reminders, and I've had a couple of people tell me today that QuickBooks hasn't sent their invoice, or that it's got lost somewhere. And make sure whenever you're sending things like this, and you'll see this phrase a lot in the next few slides, include your payment methods and details, because you'll always get people saying, oh, I didn't know how to pay. I haven't got your bank account details. Well, they're on the invoice. I mean, just because you put them on the invoice doesn't mean everyone reads the invoice, but you've put them on there anyway. And also, again, look, if it does end up in court and you have to explain your process, your creditor then can't say, no, they're not your creditor, they're your debtor. Apologies. They can't then say, oh, we didn't know how to pay. They didn't tell us, because they'll try anything. So my second reminder, this is much more business-like, right? So we are being firm, business-like in approach. We're not friendly and happy. We're not cuddly at this point. We're saying, I want the money, please. You're clear about the facts, and you have to be time-bound. So give them a date by which you want the money. 7 days, 14 days, whatever you like. Again, this is a thing that you feed into your credit control policy. So we will give people 7 days to pay on a second reminder. You might at this point decide to include the consequences of not paying. We reserve the right to take further action. Non-payment may result in the stopping of your account or whatever it might be. And again, include your payment methods and details, because they have to know how to pay you. Here's a good picture. If you're as old as me, you know how to work one of these phones. If you're young enough to not know how to work one of these phones, well, I hate you. But anyway, that's the color of the phone we used to have in my house when I was a kid. So this is, as it says there, the single most effective method of credit control. Nobody likes somebody phoning them and saying, can you pay me, please? Before you phone somebody, write down all of the facts. Make sure you've got your facts straight, because it's a bit embarrassing if you're chasing an invoice and they say, but we paid you that last week, and you just haven't allocated the payment to the invoice. Make sure you've got your invoice number, make sure you've got your reminder dates, and in our business, you have to have the property address because they'll always ask you for that. Interesting thing about my accounting system, when you click on the invoice, it tells you if they've read it or not. So at this point, if they go, I haven't seen your invoice, and I click on it and it says they read it the day after they received it, I know what's going on. Again, firm in approach, but don't get emotional. People will try, especially if you're getting a professional avoider, they'll try all sorts of things. And they might owe you a lot of money. They might have owed you it for a while. But if you get upset, if you get angry, you're less likely to get your money, I can promise. And don't rise to any bait. If they get aggressive, be firm, be polite, say, look, you're being very aggressive, I'm uncomfortable, I might need to end this call if you continue in that way. And again, make sure it's time bound. Make your aim of the call to leave with a clear commitment and a clear date. So even if they're not paying all of it, if they say, oh, look, I can only pay you half, say, that's fine. So can I expect the half in my bank account within the next 3 days or 7 days or whatever you decide? And then get a clear commitment when the other half's going to turn up. Now, important thing, remember, this is your terms and conditions and it's your credit control process. It's not theirs. So very often you'll get people saying, oh, well, it's our policy to pay on 30 days. Well, if your policy is that they pay after 7 days, then that's fine, because that's the terms and conditions that override. And the good example here is you wouldn't expect to go into Sainsbury's and say, get to the till and say, oh, well, no, I'm not going to pay you now. My policy is to pay on 30 days, because you'd get short shrift, wouldn't you? And that's exactly the same rule. Your terms and conditions take precedence. So they might like to pay in 30 days. You haven't said they can. And again, include your payment methods and details. If they haven't seen them, you can tell them the information over the phone, or you can send it in an email later. And what I would suggest is after you get off the phone, do send them an email to confirm what you've agreed, what you've said, and including your payment methods and details then. So this is the worst bit. This is the bit where people just won't pay. And this is the point where you're pretty much about to take court action. So you'll need to send a final demand or a letter before action. You can't take someone to court after you've just sent them one reminder. You have to send them an actual claim letter, which is essentially, this is what this is. And it needs to include all the information. So the total amount they owe, the invoice details, importantly, a deadline for payment, because after the deadline's passed, you're going to be taking them to court, and a clear statement that court action might follow as a result. Now, you can include a reference to the Late Payment of Commercial Debts (brackets Interest Act 1998), but this is only for commercial debts. So your private landlords don't include that. For your corporate landlords, do include it. Now, you're entitled to claim statutory interest under that act. You're entitled to claim an admin charge. I'll talk about the asterisk in a moment. And you're entitled to claim your court costs. And so in your letter before action or your final demand, you're going to make it clear you're going to apply for them. but make sure that it's in your terms and conditions. So again, you can see what we're doing is we're building our terms and conditions and we're building our credit control policy by thinking about all these bits and pieces that we might include. Now, here's a really important thing. You've got to be reasonable all the way through this. So again, we come back to that £100 and 4-stage payments. If your debtors offered a fair payment plan, accept it, but make sure, again, you send them a subsequent email or letter setting out what the payment plan was and reserving the right to take action if they don't keep up the payment plan. Most people will. Now, the asterisk, the admin charges for private landlords. So let's back a step. For corporate landlords or corporate entities, you can charge a £40 admin fee. For private landlords, you can charge an admin charge, but it's got to be proportionate and you need to be able to support it if it ever comes to court. So if you're charging £250 per invoice, that's probably not sustainable. But 20 quid, most people would be reasonable with that, I would think. But you do have to say, right, I'm charging £20 because I spent an hour chasing it and so on and so forth. Now, really important, if you threaten court action, you should carry it through because essentially, not only for your point of view, but for everyone else's point of view, if you've got a professional avoider, they'll look at it and go, aha, I won. And then they'll do it again to someone else down the line. So if you said, if you haven't paid me in 7 days, I'm taking you to court, and they haven't paid you in 7 days, take them to court. It's actually a really easy process. You do it all online. You go to that address there, money claim online. And that's entirely the wrong address. Don't include the chat GPT stuff. Where I got that from? Chat GPT, probably. It's fairly simple, this. You'll need to include all your information on the debt, your fees, your interest. And I will tell you that pretty much everybody pays at this point. If they don't pay at this point, something has gone badly wrong somewhere along the line, and you probably don't know what's going on in your customer's life, I suppose. We had one where they were going down the pan, they were circling the drain, and luckily they only owed us 64 quid, so I was quite happy with that. Now, I said you need to include information on the interest. I've included an interest calculator in the resources pack. So what happens is you put this in online, then what happens is the court will send them a claim summary, which essentially is a legal document saying there's a claim against you for this amount by these people. You must either do one of these 3 things. So they either pay you in full, boom, happy days. They might agree the claim, but ask for time to pay. If they do that, they normally have to fill in an income report. And sometimes the court will say, no, you've got plenty of money, you just pay it. They might enter a defense. So they might say, no, I'm not paying this because. If they enter a defense, what normally happens is it goes to an arbitration or a mediation service, which again, really informal thing. What happens is they phone you and say, right, why do you think this person owes you money? And then they phone the defendant and say, why do you think you shouldn't have to pay? And then they make an arbitration. If the mediation fails, then it'll go to court. And essentially, again, you don't really have to do an awful lot. But if it gets to that point, I'd say get some legal or debt collection advice. If it's a worthwhile debt, if you're trying to claim £10, it's not worth paying for legal fees, is it? Okay, I said this was about practical information. So here are 10 habits of effective credit controllers. If you do these things, you'll have very little debt on your books. And I've put there in a star, sense of humor is your biggest weapon. And I really can't emphasize this enough. Credit control, I think the thing to remember is people all do the same things. So once you've chased a few debts, you realize they're all doing the same things. They're all trying to escape in the same way, or they've all made the same mistakes, or actually you just needed to give them a bit of a push. So just keep your sense of humor. Don't worry about it. It's not your fault. So number one, chase early, right? Reminders, day one, day three, whatever way you want to do it. Again, like I said before, keep accurate notes because you might need them in the future. Be consistent. Don't let someone off one month and then expect them to pay on time the next. They won't. They will take their cues from you. Don't fear the phone, because you're not in the wrong. You're chasing the money that's owed to you. It's your money. Know your customer. Understand what's going on in the customer's world. Know if you have to take really strict action, or actually they're just messed up. Make sure you escalate promptly. If they don't pay after the first reminder, get the second reminder out. Get the final demand out. Make sure you confirm everything in writing. Thank you for offering to pay in 2 installments. The first installment is £500 due in the next 3 days. Second installment in 30 days. Stay professional at all times. Don't rise to the bait. Understand the numbers. Make sure you understand what's actually going into your claim and why. And follow your process. If you do all of these things that have been in this presentation, you'll have a fully formed credit control policy, and you'll have a process that you can just follow, and it's really easy. Okay, let me tell you how my company works. So pre-day one, all private clients pay in advance. I have learnt from bitter experience. Private clients are all lovely, happy and shiny when they want you to do something for them. When it comes time to putting their hand in their pocket, it's difficult. And actually, let's be fair, most people buying things on a customer to business relationship expect to pay in advance, don't they? Invoice according to our agreement. So if I've said I'm going to invoice you on day one, I invoice it on day one. If I've said I'm going to save up all the jobs and invoice you at the end of the month, I will do that. When the money comes in, between day 1 and 30, make sure you allocate the payments to the invoices and do it accurately. Don't guess. Otherwise, when you have to do credit control later, it gets really confusing. And if it's 3 days overdue, they get an automated reminder. And that normally, that either stimulates people to pay, or I get a phone call saying, I've already paid this. 14 days overdue, I do a statement and I send a personal email to them. So I say, I've attached this statement. These items are overdue. I know it's an oversight. Would you mind making sure, payments made in the next 7 days? If it's 30 days overdue, I'm on the phone. So I want to know what's going on. A lot of the time, actually, I'm walking into the office, and very often what you find, especially with my corporates, the branch managers put the invoice through and it just hasn't got round accounts payable. And 60 days overdue, they get a final demand or a letter before action. They get copy invoices and a statement. And at this point, I'm charging my admin fees and I'm charging interest. Very often, again, corporates or medium-sized companies, I'm looking for the FD and CFO. And you can find these guys on LinkedIn. And if there's no resolution, and I hate doing this because it's just admin, isn't it? I'll take people to court. I'll do money claim. It's fine. Okay, should you outsource? You can outsource to professional debt collectors. They're efficient and effective. They know what they're doing. It's added weight. If you've got a delinquent client and they're not listening to you, very often they'll listen to an external agency. And of course, professional debt collectors know the rules. They know the process. Downside, this is going to cost you money. Also, I'm sorry to say this, you might be too small for a professional debt collection company. A lot of them only deal with bulk stuff, despite the spam emails you get every day of the week. They may not understand your business, they may not understand your invoicing, and they may annoy your customers. They don't care because they're not, they are not their customers, they're your customers. And a lot of the time, if there's a query, you might end up dealing with it anyway, because if the debt collector calls one of your clients and said, "Why haven't you paid this invoice?" and they go, "Oh, can you tell me if that was 15 Church Street or 23 Church Street?" And then what happens is you get an email from the debt collector and you have to deal with it anyway. So the other things you can do is you can think about using a virtual assistant. A lot of people have got these for typing and stuff like that. Well, a lot of virtual assistants will do debt collection as well, or credit control. You can outsource it. We've got Indian typists. I know that they will do credit control. I don't use them because I prefer doing it myself, but you could do that. Automate as much as you can, because that will take a lot of effort off your plate. You may want to employ a part-timer. There are lots of people at home, house husbands, housewives, they've got kids. They will be happy to do 3 or 4 hours a week just chasing your debts for you. Depends how big you are, doesn't it? But importantly, whatever you do, don't ignore it. This is your money. And if you collect this money, your cash flow is going to be a whole lot better. Okay, so my 5 big credit control secrets. These are the things you learn as a professional credit controller when you're chasing debt after debt after debt. And these are really useful if maybe you've only got 1 or 2 clients that haven't paid you. Remember, number 1, it's not personal, it's business. You shouldn't be upset about phoning someone asking for your money. Secondly, it's all about your process. So write your process down, follow your process. Remember, it's your money. Keep that in your mind, and then you don't feel as bad about phoning people up and saying, "Look, guy, you're going to pay this or not." Speed and persistence. Right. If you're quick, timely with your reminders and your phone calls, and you keep sending reminders, letters, emails, phone calls, eventually they'll pay. Even the professional avoiders will pay. And really important, work without payment is called charity. So if you go out today and you do an inventory for somebody and they never pay you, essentially what you've done is you've just provided some charity work. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do charity work. I've got a couple of charities that we do inventories and checkouts for because, it's charity. But, Mr. Smith, the landlord who's got 3 properties, he's not a charity. Okay, well, I think I've talked at you for enough. I know there's a lot of information there. Like I say, you'll get copies of the slides. I suppose let's open it to the floor. Any questions? Now, hopefully, you can type in the chat box or the Q&A box. I can see. Have we got any hands raised? I may have to. Let's see. One person with new activity. Can't even find them. Oh, that was me. I put my hand up. Yeah, you may have to put your hand up to show me that you want to talk, because I'll have to enable microphones. Got no questions? Message me if you can't put in a question. Oh, here's one from Karen. Is there an average time span that you can put on your terms and conditions? No, there isn't, essentially. You can do whatever you want to do. It is, like I say, it's your terms and conditions. Generally speaking, like I say, for me, from bitter experience, my private landlords pay in advance. Smaller letting agencies, I ask for money in 7 days. Bigger guys, I ask for 30 days. So entirely up to you, Karen. No problem. Any other questions, guys? I realise we're at the end of our time now. I massively overshot on my presentation, didn't I? Okay. Can't see any hands raised. Can't see any more questions. Oh, hello. Karen's typing. Off topic. How do you handle price rises? I just did one of these. Did one of these in April. Right. So what I do is I talk to a lot of my customers about how they price. So some of the guys, they include it in a package. So if I put my prices up, it directly affects their margin. Some guys just pass it through. So they just say, here's an invoice for £100, Mr. Smith. I want £100. And some people pass it through, but put on a markup. So I talk to them. I explain to them. It's been easy this time round because everybody knows there's price rises coming because everything else has gone up, hasn't it? And then what I do is I put together my price matrix and I send it out to them and say, here's the thing that we discussed. Here are the price rises. Most of them, to be fair, 99.9% haven't said anything. They've been fine. I think communication is key. Don't just put your prices up and hope that nobody will notice. One particular client, I haven't raised my prices in 6 years. Karen, what are you doing? You need to go and have a chat with them right away. Go and have a chat with them. Because look, what's happened in the last 6 years? War in Ukraine, Donald Trump twice, war in Iran. What else has happened? National insurance rises. You've had 2, if not 3 minimum wage rises. Because when the minimum wage goes up, all my people want wage rises as well, even though they're not minimum wage. I pay them much less than that. Just have a chat with them, because you're almost getting into the realms of charity, aren't you? You're supporting their business, and I think you deserve to be paid fairly for the work you do, because I know you're good. Any further questions? No, I think I've probably bored you all into submission, I suspect. What I will say is that if you come up with any questions in the meantime, do email me. My email is chairperson at the AIIC.co.uk. I'm happy to email you with bespoke advice or just random banalities. Depends what mood I'm in. Most of the time I'm professional. So, it's look at the draw, isn't it? Okay, well, listen, thank you very much for being here tonight. It really does make a difference to us putting these things on. Do let us know also if there's anything you would like to see in the future. I'm quite happy to do these kind of bespoke sessions, and we're quite happy to go and find experts in particular areas if there's something a lot of our members want to know about. So again, thank you very much, everybody. The resource pack is in chat, but we'll be sending around an email to tell you where you can find all of this stuff later on. And have a good rest of your evening.